Hey everybody, I'm Nathaniel Dodds from tutvid.com, and today we're going to talk about creating this zoo text effect in Photoshop. Woo! Pretty sweet. I'm super excited with the way this one came out. I'm so happy with it. If you do enjoy this tutorial, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can check out all the rest of the Photoshop tutorials here and never miss any in the future as well. And also, please consider supporting the channel. I have a Photoshop course that if you're a graphic designer or into graphic design, you're just going to love. It's like a Photoshop intermediate and advanced course. There's going to be a link to it down there in the bio, the description of this video, and also a link up there in the top corner of the video. It's a little icon that has an eye in the middle of it. Click on that, check it out, and you support the channel by doing that. This channel is funded entirely by viewers just like you, so thank you. Let's jump over to Photoshop and check this thing out. Once more here, that finished effect is. I also should mention, I have this map of Philadelphia. I think I just got it from like Google Maps or something. Oh, you know what? It's Dreams Time, and I'm still using the comp here. But I do have a Dreams Time subscription, guys, so I'm not just stealing this photo. But so I don't have to go search for it during this tutorial. I'm just going to keep using this. Now, all of these animal images that are isolated on white, these did come from Dreams Time, and I further isolated them and just made them, you know, cut them all out basically. But this isn't a tutorial on select and mask and making these complex selections. I do have some tutorials on that. You can feel free to follow them. But I just feel like if we went through selecting all of the animals, we would really get bogged down on this tutorial. And this is going to be a long enough video as it is. So I've pre-isolated all these animals, and you really need like 4 or 5 animals at least. So I got these guys down here that are my main animals, and then just accent animals. The owl and the frog will kind of sit on top of letters here. You can see there's the owl, and then over here I've got the little poison dart frog chilling out on top of the O. But you can see I just have the giraffe, the lion, elephant, snake, and a gorilla as my main animals kind of interacting with the letters. So that's, you know, you can either go find images on Google or, you know, do what I did, go to Dreams Time or Adobe Stock or, you know, any of the stock photo sites and find animals that will work for you, and that's just great. All right, we're going to go File, New, and I'm going to create a new document here. I'm going to just roll with a 2560 by 1440, kind of like I've been doing for most of my videos these days, and I'm just going to hit OK or Create. And first and foremost, we're going to go Layer and choose to create a new fill layer of a solid color. And you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to leave it as just color fill. And the color that I'm going to choose is F2, F6, D3. So it's this very like cream / beigey color. All right. And we can actually delete the background at this point. I'm going to leave it there just for good measure. And now it's time to drag the map into place. So I'm just going to drag this into my image here and drop it in place. And at this point, I would rotate this. So we're going to go Edit, Free Transform. I feel really guilty about having the Dreams Time watermarks. It looks super shady, but guys, I promise you, I buy these images. All right, so I'm going to just rotate this. I basically just want to position it so I can see like downtown and just the streets and stuff. That's really what I want. Maybe I'll just kind of fudge it as well and just stretch it just a little bit. I'm just trying to make sure everything covers. All right, so everything's all covered. That looks great. Maybe I'll just pull it this way a touch so this end covers. Cool, just like that. And then hit the little check icon up here to commit that change. And we have our streets in place. I'm going to name this just map, just so we keep things kind of clear here. Now what I want to do is I want to basically grab a chunk out of the middle of this map. So I'm going to grab my lasso tool, my regular lasso tool here. I'll zoom in just a touch here so we can see what we're doing. And I'm just going to grab a selection, and it can be just a totally random, totally rough selection from the middle. It's going to be really difficult for you guys to see what it is that I'm selecting. In fact, I'm going to hold down Shift and make my selection a little bit bigger just because of the intricacy of the background here of the map. It's going to be hard to see those marching ants, but no worries. We're going to come up here and choose Select and go Modify Feather. And I'm going to feather this. 400 might be a little extreme. Let's go down to like 250, and I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to soften that up. And then I'm going to go Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal Selection. So basically it's going to just fade everything away, and you can see we're still seeing too much of the map out there. So what I'm going to do to treat this here is I'm going to make sure I click on the map over here, and I'm going to hit Command or Control L to bring up levels, and I just want to make the black stronger. So I'm just going to pull up on the black, and you can see how it just really solidifies the blacks here in the mask, and that's going to be great. So I can just do this, get a nice soft edge, and that's all cool. So now we have our map right here in the middle. And if the map still doesn't quite look perfect, well, it's probably because the edges aren't quite blurred enough. So you can select the mask and just go like Filter, Blur, and throw another 150 pixels of Gaussian blur on there. Hit OK. And there we go. We're really just fading it out. At this point, we're nitpicking at this point. So I think this is going to work for us. And now we want to colorize this whole bit. So I'm going to add a gradient map adjustment layer here, and we're going to set the darker color, the color that's being mapped to the darkest pixels. We're going to set this to BA7, I believe it's F01, I want to say I had in my notes. Yep, that looks about right. And then for the white, we're going to go with something, we could just go straight up with the background color we used before, but I'm going to go with what I have written down here, F1, F0, D4. It's close, but not quite, and I'm going to hit OK, and you can see what we've got happening here. That looks great. Now, if there's not quite enough of the detail coming through in the back, what we can do is just push this golden stop over, and you can see how it's making those background details a little bit more pronounced. So it's going to make them stick out for us just a little bit more. I kind of like that. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to hide my properties panel there. And before we do anything else, we really just want to merge all of our layers to a new layer. I'm just going to Alt double click, Option double click there on my background layer. I'm going to drag that down to the garbage because we don't need it, and I don't want it confusing anybody. There's, whatever. We really didn't need to get rid of it, but I'm just trying to do some housekeeping here. Let's use the hotkey Command Shift Option and the letter E. On the Windows, that's Control Shift Alt E. It's going to take all of your current layers, merge them to a new layer, and I'm going to name this layer Map let's go with Map Flat. And we'll just hide this layer for now. We'll get back to that a little bit later. Let's grab our text tool here, and I'm going to type out the words "the zoo" in all caps, and they're tiny down there, but we're going to change that in a second. Hit the little check icon up here to commit the change. You can see we got a little tiny "the zoo" down there. Let's grab our character panel here. If you don't have it open, you can go Window, and there it is, Character. And I'm going to choose the font Arial Black, I believe is what it's called. It's just like a big, bold, Arial Black. That's great. And I'm going to make the size, I believe 450 points is going to be big enough. Yep, that looks about right. Let me just align this to my document here by going Select All. And I can grab my Move tool here. And I can just use these alignment options here to align to the horizontal and vertical centers. There we go, Command or Control D to deselect. And I do want to change the color of this text. So I have the text layer selected here. So here in the character panel, when I edit this stuff, it's going to edit the selected type in the document. So I can double click on color. And I'm just going to color this very simple, just 0D, 0D, 0D. It's just a very, very dark gray, not quite black. I just want to lift it out of the total solid pitch black range. And I'm going to duplicate this layer by hitting Command or Control J. I'm going to hide the original layer. Again, we'll get back to that in a little bit. And I'm going to right-click on this layer and choose to convert it to a shape. So we've basically just converted live text to just vector shape. It's all path-based shapes. And we did that because we really want to get rid of these holes in the middle of our O's. And we can do that now that it is a path by grabbing the Direct Selection tool over here. It's the white arrow, Direct Selection tool. We're going to deselect all of the paths and drag a selection over the middle path of an O. And then just hit your Delete or Backspace key, right? So we can just do that. Bing, bing, and we get rid of the centers of those O's. So now we have the word the zoo, or the words the zoo, looking just like this. So now we're ready to sort of create that peeling back effect, right, with these letters peeling back away from the open holes behind them. So what we're going to do is we're going to Command or Control click on that live text version of our type that we saved. So Command or Control click right there on the layer thumbnail. You can see it's loading that selection. We can actually shut off the zoo, the pathy stuff we have up there. And then we want to turn on the Map Flat layer because we want to cut a chunk of this layer out and pop it up onto its own layer. We're going to do that by hitting Command or Control J. So now you can see we have this copy of the zoo. It's just pixel art up here on its own layer. I don't know, it might be difficult to see. If I hit Command or Control I to invert it, you can see there it is. Command or Control I again to invert it back to its regular colors. I can shut off Map Flat once more. And we really want this Map Flat text. In fact, I'm going to name this layer like Opened -door, because that's kind of the effect we're going to give the text. I want this to be above the dark text, the dark path-based just shape really right there. So we're going to begin transforming this open door text right now. It'll all begin with just clipping a levels adjustment layer to that text so we can kind of see what we're working on. So come up here to the adjustments and choose levels adjustment. And in order to clip this to just the text below, use the hotkey Command Option or Control Alt and the letter G. And what I want to do here is just kind of make things a little bit darker. So I'm going to take the midtones to about 0.8, and then I'll probably take the white point here and I'll knock it down to like, I don't know, 240, 245, something like that. I'll go 242. That looks pretty good. Just so there's a subtle enough change that, as the text is peeling back, it's gonna look differently. Light is gonna hit it differently. Everything's gonna interact with it differently. So here's what we're gonna do now. We're gonna select the open door text layer, and we're gonna begin working with these letters one at a time. So you're gonna need your rectangular marquee tool right up here, the rectangular marquee. Drag a selection out over the first letter here, the letter T, and go Edit, Free Transform. And the first thing we'll do is we'll push the letter backward. So we're going to crunch it toward the left a little bit, right? Just like that. That looks pretty good. We use our arrow keys to nudge it back toward the right because we really want the text to be lined up perfectly on this far left edge, or as close to perfect as we can get it. Then we'll right-click here and we'll choose Warp. And here's where we'll just add a little bit of like whoosh just to the text to just kind of be like, yeah, you're kind of peeling back and looking a little funky. And then I'll just commit the change and then hit Command or Control D to deselect. So there's the letter T sort of peeling back. And now we'll do the same thing with the rest of the letters. So just use that rectangular marquee tool And you can hit Command or Control T to bring up free transform, crunch the letter back. Make sure you just nudge it together so that left edge kind of meets up perfectly. Right click within that transform handle box, go warp, and we'll just make this letter peel up a little bit. And you can kind of mess around with these letters, make them look a little bit funky. There's nothing wrong with that. I'll just pull this back a little bit there. Yeah, make things interesting, right? And then we'll go ahead and commit that change, Command or Control D to deselect. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these letters very quickly, and well, you're seeing me do it right now. So I will be right back to getting more stuff done with this tutorial in just a moment. And here, actually, before I finish the last letter, one of the things I want to show you, Command or Control T to bring up free transform. When we crunch this back, I'm going to make the second O on the word zoo open not quite as much. One of the other things that you can do to kind of mess around and tweak the perspective more is use the perspective command here and just pull it up like that. So, you know, it naturally is going to look like the letter is swinging open. We can right click here, go warp, and, you know, we could stretch it out as well a little bit and kind of make things interesting here in the center hole of the O. Great. Command or Control D to deselect. Maybe I'll select the letter Z here, go Command or Control T once more, and perspective this a little bit. Just stretch it out a little bit more. Just makes things interesting. Command or Control D to deselect. So here we go. We have sort of the words, the zoo, peeling back, and the map is peeling back with them. So now what we need to do is add a little bit of a shadow, just like here along the left edge of all of these letters. We're going to do that by creating a new layer here above our levels layer up here. So I'm going to choose new layer icon right down here. I'm going to name this DNB. You could name it Dodge and Burn, but we want to clip it to these letters. So we're going to clip it right to the top of this levels adjustment, since that's clipped to the text, the open door layer beneath it. Command Option or Control Alt and the letter G. And then we'll come up here and go Edit and choose Fill. Oh, not Stroke. We're going to go Edit, Fill. And I want to fill this with, there you go, 50% gray. Beautiful. You can see it looks really bad, but we're going to set this to the blend mode of overlay here, and that's going to make all the gray disappear. We're going to grab our burn tool, which is right here, located beneath the dodge tool or maybe the sponge tool, the burn tool right there. We're going to set the exposure to 100%. I'm going to use my bracket keys, my square bracket keys, to make my brush a bit bigger, and I'm just going to paint shadows here along the edges of the letters. So just kind of like that. Great. Go right here along the E. You can make the shadows as intense or not intense as you like. There we go. Paint that in as well. And then I'm going to paint this along here. Voila, just like that. And you can see there's before, there's after. So just adding that little bit of shadow just adds that, I don't know, just adds that bit of realism that the text really needs to make it convincing that, you know, yeah, this is in fact beginning to peel up off of the background. And you are reading this optical illusion that we're creating here correctly. So now what we need to do is create the shadows from these open door bits of type, right? So you can see these little shadows underneath the letters. We're going to create them right now. So here's how we do that. We can come over here and grab the open door text layer. Well, not the text layer, the pixel layer. And we're going to duplicate it by holding down our Alt or Option key. And the reason I'm not hitting Command or Control J is because I really don't want to mess with all the clipping layers. I want to duplicate this layer but pull it downward. So if I hold down the Alt or Option key and simply drag the layer down beneath it, you can see we drag out another copy of this layer. And I think I'm going to rename this layer here like open door hyphen shadows or something like that, just to make it clear. And then I'm going to use the hotkey Command or Control U to bring up the hue saturation dialog. And I'm just going to reduce the lightness to 0. It's going to make this layer solid black. See how that's solid black? It doesn't look that way because right now it's still hidden underneath our open door text. But now we want to segment out each of these letters onto their own layer. So we can just hide the open door text for a quick second and focus on the shadows. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the new layer via cut command to cut each of these letters and pop them up onto their own layer. So I'm going to preserve the letter T. So I'm going to use my rectangular marquee tool and select the HE and Z double O here. And I'm going to use the hotkey Command Shift or Control Shift and the letter J. And you're going to see here what just happened. We just took he zoo and popped it up onto its own layer, therefore leaving T as its own layer. So now we'll select the letter E and the word zoo, Command Shift J, and we'll do the same here for the rest of this, and we will quickly pop all of these letters onto their own layers. Just like that. You can see all on their own layers. Let's blur each of these letters here about 20 pixels. So I'll go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I don't want 150 pixels. I want more like 20 pixels, just very, very blurred. I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to use the hotkey Command or Control F to apply it to each of the other layers. You can see I'm just selecting a layer, applying the blur, Command or Control F, Command or Control F, on and on and on. And now we have these crazy blurs, but now we need the letters to kind of sink beneath, but also on that angle. So here's how we're going to do that. I have the T selected right now, the blurred T. I'm going to hit Command or Control T, free transform. And I'm going to drag, see the center anchor point? I'm going to drag it up here to the top corner of the letter. So right there is kind of where I want to make my changes based upon that point. Then I'm going to come up here and change the vertical skew. It's this V up here. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to change this to something around 20. I'll probably go with like 18. So that looks pretty good. I think 18 is going to work for us. I'm going to hit the check icon, and there we go. The T is done. So now I can select the letter H, Command or Control T, drag that not transform handle, that anchor point up to that top corner, and then go to the vertical skew again. 18, great. Commit that change, and I'm going to go through the rest of the letters here really, really quickly, and you can see the process just remains the same for all of these letters. And we'll come in and we'll clean up and mask these letters away, the shadows away, and make it all work like it needs to as we kind of add the animals and clean up each letter individually. For now, let's select the bottom shadow letter down here, the T, hold down Shift, and select the top O. And we're just going to group these by hitting Command or Control G. And I'm going to name this Opened Door Shadows or something like that, just so we know that this layer group is all of our shadowy bits. And I can turn my Open Door text back on. You can see that the shadow is very strong. In fact, let's just select that layer group. Let's reduce the opacity here to like 65%. Something like that's a little bit more manageable. The next thing I want to do is grab the zoo shape layer here, and I want to duplicate this layer. Command or Control J, and I'm going to name this Inner Shadow or Inner Shadows, something like that, if I can spell correctly, that is. And I will, well, number one, we're going to reduce the fill opacity to 0. So I really want all that color to go away. And just if you want to see what the fill opacity does, I'll give you a good example. Let's double click on that shape. We can change this color to anything we want. Let's make it bright blue, just so it's very visible, right? We're going to go Layer, and I'm going to come over here to Layer Style and choose Blending Options first and foremost. And we want to tick on this, Layer Mask Hides Effects. This is going to be important later on when we have to paint away some of this inner shadow as we add the animals. We want to make sure that the Layer Mask will hide the effect as well. And then we're going to come over here and tick on Inner Shadow. I'm going to select Inner Shadow. And these are basically the settings that I want. 55% opacity, blend mode of normal, a solid black shadow, solid black-ish. There we go, shadow. Opacity 55% is great. I think I'm going to change the angle to like -33 though. I want it coming kind of at the bottom corner like that. A distance of 10 is going to work great, and a size of 7 is just perfect. I am going to hit OK. Now you can see we have a problem because we see all of that blue. Well, if we reduce fill opacity will hide the blue, yet keep the layer styles in place. So if we just get rid of the fill opacity, you can see, well, it's going to be very difficult to see because our background's so stinking dark, but there will be an inner shadow there. And when we add animals, we'll be able to have that inner shadow there, which just further adds to the depth, the three-dimensional feeling of this text effect. And I think finally, at long last, it's time to begin adding animals. So I'm going to get rid of this map of Philadelphia. I'm going to go to my animals ISO document here, and I'm going to choose this giraffe. So we're going to begin with the giraffe because I think the giraffe is going to go first. I'm going to grab my move tool, and I'm going to drag this guy over to our document, drop him in place. He's much larger than we need. Now I have converted him to a smart object, so if you're bringing your images in and they have a mask from, let's say, select and mask, just right click on that image, make sure that you convert it to a smart object. It's just going to be helpful if we need to apply filters or adjustments, or just being able to come in and scale and play with the image after the fact. So I want the giraffe to be coming out of the H. So if we just reference the file we already finished, you can see how the giraffe is just kind of peeking his head out of the H, and that's looking good. So I'm going to take him, I'm going to size him down, Command or Control T, and I'm going to use my width and height here. I'll make him like 30% of his size currently, something like that. And he needs to be a little bit bigger than that. So hold down Shift, just drag him out a little bit. Because the idea is going to be, yes, his head will be coming through the H, but he'll also be kind of snacking on the tree that'll be coming out from behind T. So that's kind of where my mind is right now. So I'm thinking like as long as his little snozzle, his little mouthy, nozzly nose, whatever is going on up there, is over the T, things are going to be just fine for us. So I'm going to nudge him over just a little bit. Maybe something kind of like that will work. I'll just make him a little tiny bit bigger. Oh, too much. There we go. Something like that will probably work. We could spend all day fussing with him. Now comes the point where we actually mask the animal. Now, I really want my inner shadow to be above the giraffe because I want the inner shadow to be cast on the body of the giraffe. So let's just drag the giraffe beneath the inner shadow, and you can immediately see there's the inner shadow, right? The blue color is completely gone. So we can see the bits of the giraffe that we need to get rid of. Well, before we start getting rid of the bits of the giraffe, we also know that we need to get rid of part of the H here because, well, it's blocking the giraffe's neck, and we want that optical illusion of the giraffe sticking his head through the H. So here's what we do. First and foremost, on the giraffe layer, we want to add a layer mask by hitting this little icon down here. This is going to be the basis of what we do. Now, we want to Command or Control click here on our zoo text. It's going to load it as a selection, and simply we're going to inverse the selection. Select Inverse. And now I'm going to grab a brush. So I'm going to take the brush tool. I'm going to right click. I want it to be a pretty big brush here, right? Something that moves quickly. So I'll go with about 100 pixels. I want my foreground color set to black, which it is. And I have that mask selected on my giraffe layer. And I now, remember, we selected the letters, but then we inverse the selection. So we're selecting all the bits around the letters. So when I paint with my brush, I'm going to paint away the bits of the giraffe that are outside of the letter. Great. Now I don't mind if he's sticking out of the letter there because remember at this point he's going to be coming through the letter H. So I'm going to hit Command or Control D to deselect, and let's paint away the bit of the giraffe that's being covered, or well, not the bit of the giraffe, let's paint away the bit of the text that's covering our giraffe. So we need to add a mask to the opened door text as well. So select Open Door, add a layer mask by hitting the new layer mask icon. And in this case, we want to Command or Control click on our animal. So I'm going to Command or Control click on my giraffe, and I'm simply going to paint with black to paint away that part of the H, just like that. Command or Control D to deselect. You can see now we're really beginning to get the effect, but we have a problem, right? Because if he's coming in front of the H, he shouldn't have that inner shadow cast on him. This is why we wanted to make sure we ticked on Layer Mask Hides Effects, because we also want to add a layer mask to the inner shadow. Now, when we want to paint away part of the inner shadow, we're just going to come and paint black on the layer mask for inner shadow, right? So here, I can select that layer mask, grab my brush tool, I'm painting with black, and I can just paint that shadow right away. And look at how quickly the optical illusion just works. It just works. And we're even going to paint in shadow here beneath his neck in a moment. But let's get the rest of the animals in place. So we've got the giraffe in place. Next up, we're going to get a lion peering out from behind the letter E. So we're going to come in here. There's the lion. He's huge. He's regal. He is everything that a lion ought to be. We're going to drag this guy over, drop him in place. You can see just a massive file, and I even sized this one down a little bit. But you can see here he's above the shadow, so let's drag him beneath the shadow and hit Command or Control T. And yeah, you can see he's at 40%. He is a smart object. We're going to take him down to about, I don't know, 15%, something like that. Let's see what 15% does. 15% still might be a little bit big. Let's tuck him down about that big. I basically want it so his eye is going to be peering out of the middle part of the E there. Right? So I'm going to move him over something like so. It's probably good. I need to make him just a little bit bigger, I think. Make him just a little touch bigger. Bump him over. There we go. Great. Now, we need to mask him to the E, obviously. So we're going to add a layer mask to his layer, first and foremost. We're going to Command or Control click on the zoo text. We're going to inverse this. Inverse. And I'll grab my brush once more and just paint with black and get rid of all of the lion body that's sticking out here. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Hey, we have a little bit of the lion body overlapping the giraffe. We'll touch on that in just a second. You can see here, we just paint this guy right away. I'm going to right click. I'm going to make this brush a little bit more hard edged. We'll use a soft edge brush later. There we go. We paint all that away. Let's go Command or Control D to deselect, and we can just straight up go in there and just paint over where the lion is appearing above the giraffe. Now you can see him in there. A couple things. The edges of his hair, a little fringy, not quite as perfect as I would want. Maybe we can clean that up a little bit. And he's also not matching like the richness and vibrance of the other giraffe. So let's do a couple things here to clean this up. Let's first and foremost add a levels adjustment layer above the lion and clip this to just the lion. Command Option or Control Alt and the letter G. And what I think I'll do is I'll make them a little tiny bit darker, right? And we'll also infuse some red. So go to red here, and let's just swing this center point. I'm going to swing it here toward the left. You can see we're adding red. Maybe we should add some yellow as well. So we'll go to the blue point here, and well, maybe not too much blue. Let's go back to red here. And I'm going to pull down on the white point, and that's, well, we're adding cyan. I'm sorry, I grabbed the wrong point. We're going to grab the black point here, and we're really just going to push some red into that. So if I pull the white point here, it's also going to give us some red. I'll pull this back just a little bit. We might need to make him just a little tiny bit darker. And we're just playing and fussing. You can see before levels, after levels. We're just giving him some good red richness, just roughly trying to make him match the giraffe a little bit more. If we want to get rid of the really light wispy stuff up there, we could also add another dodge and burn layer here. So we'll create a new layer, and I'm going to clip it to the levels, Command Option or Control Alt and the letter G, and I'll just name this D and B and maybe a -2 just for good measure. And once more, we'll go Edit Fill. Fill it with 50% gray. You got it, right? And we'll set this to overlay as well. And then we'll just take that same burn tool and we'll just burn over the edges of his hair. And maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll kind of, sort of. It does a little bit. It definitely helps, right? There's before, there's after. It definitely helps kind of blend things in a little bit. You can see we're painting out over the bit of the document there. So maybe we would want to just undo that and just be a little bit cleaner. Maybe what we'll do here, I'll just undo a few times. And what we'll do is just Command or Control click on the zoo type just so we make sure we constrain our burn just within the text. Something like so. And we can see we've got this very regal looking line. I'll just kind of darken up some of the other bits of him to kind of make him match a little bit. And maybe he's even a little bit too red. Command or Control D to deselect. And we can just select the levels adjustment layer at this point and just reduce the opacity a little bit until he blends nicely. About 60%, 65% opacity. That's great. So we've got him, the lion, peering out from behind the E, looking good. Now we're going to move along to the elephant. So we got the elephant right here. Let's grab this guy, drag him over to our text effect. Voila. Now, you can see we just dropped him right here in the clipping stack. That's not right. We want to drag him up above the clip stuff, and then we want to unclip him, and we use that same hotkey, Command-Option-G, Control-Alt-G, to unclip, and there we go. We have our elephant. Now, the elephant's facing the wrong direction, so Command or Control-T, and we're going to right-click and choose to flip him horizontally. There we go. Great. And we need to size him down a bit because he's going to be peering out from behind the Z. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. We're going to tip him upward, I think. Make him a little bit bigger. We want to show as much of the elephant as we can. And if at all possible, show some of the elephant ear. Because elephants, if you can't see their ears, they just look weird, man. They look really, really weird. But the elephant is such a cool animal. I want to make sure I get the elephant in here. And I think something like that works. So I'm going to commit that change. And we have a little bit of work to do here, right? So let's add our mask to the elephant. Let's do the same thing. Load the text as a selection. Now, we don't want to get rid of this bit of the elephant hanging out here because we want to see his trunk and the mouth and everything sticking out of the letter. But it all looks very funky because we need to get rid of some shadowing and we need to get rid of some of the elephant back here. So I'm going to inverse this selection, select inverse. And let's begin first. Grab our brush tool. We're painting with black. Let's just get rid of the elephant right there, right? Let's begin there. We know we need to hide that. Command or Control D to deselect. Let's go up to our inner shadows layer here because we want to get rid of this very distracting inner shadow. So we're going to go select that layer mask, right? And we're going to just paint away here. We'll just get rid of that. Elephant should be coming out from behind the Z looking pretty natural. All right, much, much better, right? But in the case of the elephant, we actually need to hide part of the letter O to reveal his trunk because his trunk should be coming out on top of the letter O, so to speak. So we need to hide part of the letter O. So here what we're going to do, we're going to Command or Control click on the layer thumbnail for the elephant. Boom, load the elephant as a selection. And we'll come back up here to the open door text, select that layer mask, and just paint right in there with black. Command or Control D to deselect. And there is our elephant popping his head out from behind the letter Z. Now, I know it might be looking rough, but as we pull this together, it's really going to start looking super cool. You just gotta trust me here. So let's select the elephant layer right here, because next we're going to drag the snake over. So I got the little snake right here. I'm going to grab him, grab my move tool, bring him over into the document, plop him in place. He's a bit too large, so again, Command or Control T. We're going to size him down. I'm just holding the letter, my shift key down. And I'm going to put him over here. The idea is I kind of want him to look, I want this right edge of the snake to be, jumping out over the edge of the text, if you will. But I also want the head of the serpent to be, or the viper here, to be coming around the front of our letter O, right? And the rest of the stick and the snake will be coming up like from a hole in the ground beneath the letter O. So this sizing and positioning is just perfect, just like that. Let's add a mask to him, although I don't know, we're not going to have to mask too much of him away other than the bit beneath the letter here. So just Command or Control click to load the letter, select inverse, grab the brush. We're going to paint that bit away. Command or Control D to deselect. We're going to come up here to our inner shadow layer because we want to paint away the distracting inner shadow just right there over the snake. So select the layer mask for the inner shadow layer. Now we want to Command or Control click on the snake to load that as a selection. Why? Well, because we don't want to get rid of any shadowing that's above or below this bit of the snake. We are going to be bringing some trees into here, and we still want those trees to interact with the shadow in the same way that any of these animals will be. So by loading the snake as a selection, we just get rid of that one bit of the shadow as we need to. Let's leave the snake selected, come up here to our open doors letter, select that layer mask, and we want to just zoom in here because we got to be a little careful, and we'll just paint away the bits of the snake that, or paint away not the bits of the snake, but the bits of the O here, which the snake is running over. So I'm going to be careful, too, down here at the bottom. There's no reason to get rid of all of this color or all of this, coloring here for the text, because the snake just needs, he just needs his pathway here above the letter. That's what's going to look realistic. Command or Control D to deselect, and you can see now it looks like the snake is coming up and out and around the letter O. All optical illusion using masks. Last but not least, we're going to grab our friend the gorilla. He's right up here. And And well, that's before we get to the owl and the poison dart frog, of course. But we're going to bring those guys over kind of last. Let's drag the gorilla over, drag him, and we'll drop him into place. You can see here we just dragged him and dropped him as a clipped layer above our open door text. Let's drag him down here below and get him just above the snake. Now, part of the problem I'm having with the gorilla, and aside from the fact that Select a Mask didn't really do the greatest job pulling him and selecting him, but so much of his body is going to be covered up, it's not really going to make a difference for us. I really want his arm to be bent, almost so his fist is going into his, the side of his gut here. If you look at our version up here, we just twisted his arm around. It looks a little funky, I know, but you probably didn't notice it if I didn't point it out. So what I want to do, I want to get him into place first so we make sure we're not over or under bending his arm. So I'm going to move him up into place, Command or Control T. Let's just size him down a little bit as well. I really want, the idea is going to be he's sort of peering out from the middle of this letter O, and his arm is coming through and then just kind of resting on the outside of the letter O. So I think kind of sizing him like this will be about perfect. I'll move him up just a little bit, nudge him with my arrow key, something like that will be great. And now what I'm going to do, because he's isolated just on his own layer, we can apply a puppet warp to him. So I'm going to go Edit and choose Puppet Warp, and I'm going to place a couple pins here. So I'm going to place a pin here at his shoulder. His elbow is somewhere probably right around there, and then a pin here on his wrist. And I'm simply going to pull his wrist and just drop it over here so it's sort of, kind of resting on the letter, just like that. Now I want to make sure the pin depth, I want to just click that to make sure it's just pulled up above everything. And maybe what I'll do also, I'll place a pin over here and just pull his body back down somewhat into normal position, and then I will commit this change by hitting the little check. Now, just to quickly check to make sure his hand is not hidden behind his body, I'll shut off the open door text layer, and we can see, yep, his hand is above everything. It's going to look just fine. Okay, great. Let's turn the open door text layer back on. And first and foremost, we'll do what we've always done. And by the way, because it's a smart object, the puppet warp gets applied as a smart filter, which means we can shut it off, we can turn it on, do whatever we want. I'm going to collapse that, though. I don't need smart filters. Let's add a layer mask. So click down here, choose to add a layer mask. And first and foremost, Command or Control click down here on our text. Command or Control click, select inverse, as we've been doing. Grab the brush tool. Now, we don't want to paint away the bit of his elbow that's hanging out here, because that's all going to be part of the effect when we reveal his elbow here above the text. We just want to hide his body down here. So I'm just going to paint this stuff away. There goes the bottom of the gorilla because he's sitting behind the O. Command or Control D to deselect. We're going to load our gorilla as a selection here. And I think first and foremost, let's just, well, I guess let's start painting away here on the open door text. So I'm just going to paint this away. And you can see as I paint, I'm going to reveal a bit of his body. I want that to be hidden. In fact, this little bit of scuzzy stuff here, we're going to get rid of that in a moment once we deselect this. But I want this to be selected here. I'm going to zoom in. And this is probably where it helps to have a tablet. You know what, actually, I'm going to deselect right now. Command or Control D to deselect. If you have a tablet, it probably helps at this point because you can just quickly get in and paint a relatively nice selection. I'm just right-clicking here. I'm going to soften the edge of my brush a little bit. And I'm going to set my foreground color to white. So I'm going to hit the letter X. You're going to see over here, it's going to flip my foreground and background colors. And because I'm painting with white on this mask, I'm on the open door text here. Because I'm just painting, I want to get this open door bit of type covering up the gorilla's body down here. You can see we're going to start to build this illusion that his arm is just coming right through and above and kind of resting here on our text. So I think I'm just going to hide that whole bit there, just because I think that'll just work better for us, don't you think? There we go. That's cool. I'm going to zoom out, and you can see now it just kind of looks like his arm came through. Now when we add a shadow, it'll add a little bit of realism. The most difficult thing is that you're really just seeing his knuckles because his arm was firmly planted in the ground in the original photo, but we're working with the stock that we got here. So let's go ahead here and paint away the bigger shadows wherever we don't need it, right? There's a lot of that we just never got rid of. So we're going to come down here to the open door shadows. We need to add a layer mask to that layer. And the key here is we just want a large soft edge brush. So right click, make sure we set the hardness of our brush to 0. And the size, we probably want like 50 or 60, maybe even a little bit bigger. This is all going to depend on your document size. I'm going to go with like 100 pixels here. And we're going to zoom in on the T. And really the only areas I need shadow on the T are beneath this lip here and beneath the bottom part of it. So I'm just going to gently paint that away to kind of make it blend a little bit better. Maybe make my brush even a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to paint that away. So we just have a nice little shadow there. For the H, we really probably don't need much in the way of the shadow here on the side. That's a little distracting. Same for up there. Probably don't need much in the way of that. Under here, all that shadowing is good. Here on the E, same thing. We don't need the shadow here. That's just supposed to be the paper peeling back. There really shouldn't be shadow. But all the shadow underneath here is very realistic. Here with the Z, get rid of that shadow. Get rid of the shadow here on the back side of that. Hide all of that. Great. We might want to make sure we save some of the shadow there that would be casting naturally onto our elephant. I'm painting with black again, and I'm just going to paint away some of the O shadow up here. Great. Saving the shadow down there for the O. And then same thing here with our gorilla, or really the O on the end, I should say. And we'll keep the shadow down there beneath it all. So we really clean up our shadows that way. That's great. You can see we just added that kind of crazy looking mask. And I think we should also just paint in the shadows for our animals here that are peering through. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another layer on top of this clipped stuff, because I really don't want the shadows for the animals to leave the face of the open letter. So because that's the only area that should have any shadow cast onto it, for the most part. So let's create a new layer here, and let's just name this layer like shadows-2 or something. And then I'll hit Command, Option, or Control, Alt, and the letter G. And now what I'll do is I'll come over here to my giraffe, grab my brush tool, make my brush maybe a little bit smaller here, and just paint, and just begin painting in. Like there's where shadow is going to be. We're gonna soften and blur that a little bit in a little bit. Over here we should have something here for the elephant's trunk, right? Something like that probably works, and maybe just a tiny bit of a shadow up there, something like that. And then down here for the snake, he's going to, of course, have his shadow. That's great. And then for the gorilla's arm, we'll just go ahead and paint some shadowy shadow stuff down there for him as well. So that's cool. All right, so we have those shadows. Now what we need to do, now remember, it's just being clipped down to our text, so it's not going to go anywhere. We can go ahead and go Filter, Gaussian or Blur, Gaussian Blur. And we'll just, again, we'll give this like a 20 pixel blur, something like that looks fine. And if we feel the need at this point, we could reduce the opacity as well. But, I don't want to do too much damage. So that's going to work pretty well. I mean, you can go and you can tweak and adjust and mask away some of these shadows as you see fit. But I don't want to spend all day here working on this. We've spent long enough. But let's go ahead and drag some trees into here to get some foliage involved. And then we'll add the owl and the little frog to this, this composite text effect as well. So I have here this trees stock photo. This is another Dreams Time stock photo that I'm using. I'm just going to right click and choose to open this here in Photoshop. And we want to isolate these trees. They are isolated over white, but we just want the trees. How am I going to do that? Well, here, let's try this. Let's Alt Option double click on the background layer, and let's just straight up add a layer mask to this layer. When we do that, we can open up our properties panel here, and we can choose to immediately start working with color range. And color range will give us this live, like, hey, here's a preview of what you're getting. Now, obviously, my problem is we're selecting the white areas, not the trees. But it's easy to select the white areas because I can just use my eyedropper tool and select the white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tick on this invert option here, and that's going to now get rid of the white and show the trees. So that's great, but my problem really is, I'm going to hit OK here. My problem is I can't see how clean the selections are because I have no good point of reference underneath. So let's just Command or Control click on the new layer icon. That's going to add a new layer below, and we'll just fill this layer with black. So let's go Edit, Fill. And we'll just choose to fill this here, contents, black, hit OK. And we can see, as long as it looks relatively clean, it's going to work. And that looks pretty relatively clean. We can select the layer mask here, choose color range. It brings it up again. We can tweak it. It's like a live effect. We could reduce fuzziness, or we could add fuzziness. Yeah, maybe we'll bump the fuzziness up and just clean up those edges even more. That looks pretty great. Remember, we would be bringing the trees over. By the way, fuzziness of like 175 works great for this image. And by the way, I will have links to these stock photos in the description of this video. Probably should have mentioned that earlier, but I will have links down in the description. Now what we can do with these trees is when we bring them over, remember, our background is fairly light, so I think we'll get good transfer in terms of what we see. So let's just begin working with these trees. First and foremost, let's pop them all up onto their own layer. So I'm going to select this tree, Command-Shift-J. We're going to pop it up onto its own layer here. Well, it's not going to because we have the layer mask selected. Make sure you select the layer. Command-Shift-J, pop it up onto its own layer. Uh-oh, the white stuff came back. Hold down Alt or Option and just duplicate that layer mask, drag it up there, and you will have it duplicated. Don't worry about that little alpha channel preview that I just got. That was because I clicked the wrong thing. But now that tree is up on its own layer. Select this bottom layer again. Let's take the next tree here. Let's pop that bad boy up onto its own layer. Hold down Alt or Option and drag that mask up. And the same thing here. We just want to isolate these trees and so we can drag them over and use them a little bit more easily. All right, so I'm going to begin with this tree in the top corner here. So I'm going to select it. It's this guy right here. I can tell he's in the top corner. Grab my move tool. I'm going to bring it over into my document. Now, these trees are pretty big. See, it just looks good, doesn't it? Just adding the greenery to this just looks good, even if we were to drop a tree right in the middle. But we're going to do a little bit more than this. I'm going to right-click on this, and as I recommend you do with the animals, we're going to convert each of these trees to a smart object as we bring them in here. And I think I'm going to stack these. I want them to be beneath that inner shadow, right? I want them to get that inner shadow. Look at how cool. That just looks cool even like that, right? All right, we're going to size this down here. And this is going to be the bit of tree that's coming up out of the letter T. I can even just like rotate this a little bit if I want. You can see little Giraffe's getting his fill right there. That looks pretty cool. And I'll move that over. Great. Now we need to add a layer mask to this first tree. So add a layer mask. Command or Control click on the letters the zoo, select inverse. We're going to do this whole song and dance all over again. Grab your brush tool, and what we're going to do here is we're going to paint away the tree on the outside, but I think like I want to keep bits and pieces of it, right? Like over here on the side, it doesn't necessarily need to be a hard like hidden. You can see how we just kind of like fade that a little bit. So there's still a little bit sticking out there, right? It just adds another element of like, hey, the tree is kind of a living, thing here. I'm just going to paint away everything, make sure I get it all the way up into the corner of the T. Command or Control D to deselect. And there we go. We have the tree now coming out of the letter T. We want some tree coming up here behind the giraffe as well. So let's go back to trees, and I'll select any of the other trees here. Let's just go with the second tree. Let's drag this guy over. We'll be mixing the trees up and matching them and everything. Again, right-click, convert to Smart Object, Command or Control T, hold down Shift and the Alt or Option key. And this is going to be treeness coming up from behind the giraffe. I think something like that's probably cool. Now, what we can do here with this tree is, well, number one, you can just drag it straight up beneath the giraffe, right? We can just drag it beneath the giraffe, and you can see, there we go. It just looks like it's coming out from behind the giraffe. And all we need to do now, Command or Control click on the text once again. Well, wait, hold on. Deselect, Command or Control D. Make sure we add a layer mask to this layer, and then Command or Control on the text. Select, inverse, and paint away the bits you don't want. So obviously, make sure you select the layer mask. I don't want to see the trunk. I don't want this tree nonsense down here. This tree stuff, probably don't want that either because the paper is supposed to be like peeling back. And this might be a bit too much coming out over here. I'll just like trim that up a little bit like that. And maybe also I will Command or Control D to deselect. I'll paint away the bit of tree down there. And maybe I just want like the tree to fade a little bit from behind the giraffe, right? Just kind of something sort of like that. Let me undo that. Just paint that away just a smidgen. Something like that I think looks cool. And of course, you can always just keep tweaking and adjusting it as you, the artist, sees fit. That looks pretty good. Now, one thing that is bugging me is the leaves above the giraffe's little snout there. I'm not sure I necessarily like that. So let's just Command or Control click on the giraffe, right, to load him as a selection. Let's come up to that tree layer, which is this tree up on top, select its layer mask, and just simply paint with black there just to uncover the giraffe's nose. And then Command or Control D to deselect. That looks, I think, a little bit more natural, a little bit more like it should. All right, so we have kind of our first trees in place. Now it'll just be a matter of running through, and I'll just speed through the video at this point, add the rest of these trees as I need, and, we'll be back to working on kind of some final color treatments and really making this effect what it is in just a second here. And you can see just like that, we have our trees all lined up. And, you can go through and you can mess with and mask. If I decide, some of that maybe is just a little out of hand in there, that's great. And you can see pretty much the key here is making sure that you erase also any inner shadow that appears. It really allows you to have that kind of seamless transition look of the foliage coming right out. And like that does not look realistic there. So I probably select this tree and just paint away that nonsense there and just fade it up a little bit. Just kind of something like that. You can make the brush smaller if you think the fade is just like that looks ridiculous, which I think I would kind of agree with you. There we go, something like that. Still not perfect, but better. And, go through and just kind of play and have fun with it. There's a bit of that tree showing through that probably shouldn't, but maybe it'll actually work for us and just be a little bit of foliage that sticks through here underneath of our elephant. I've got the top tree layer selected here, and at this point, let's drag in our owl. So I'm going to grab the owl right there. I'm going to drag him over to the document. And what we'll do, he's now on top of all the trees and everything. That's perfect. I actually probably want him on top of even the open door letters. So I'm going to drag him all the way up to the top. And then we'll Command or Control T to free transform. And we need to make him really, really small. So just really small. Not so small that he looks like a bug or anything, but small enough that he very much assumes the kind of shape and size of a tiny little owl, as he should, especially when considered next to this giraffe. So he's probably actually even a little bit too big, but we still want to be able to see him. So we're going to leave him there, and probably actually we should just throw a little bit of shadow underneath him. So go back to the Shadows 2 layer here, and we will grab our brush tool right there and hit the letter D to set black as our foreground color. Use the square bracket keys to make our brush a little bit smaller. There we go, paint a little shadow beneath him, and we want to grab a rectangular marquee tool, drag a selection over that shadow. Remember, we're on the layer where we just painted the shadow, not the owl or anything. And then we'll go filter and just choose blur, Gaussian blur, and we need to throw a little Gaussian blur on this. 20 pixels is way too big, maybe something like 6. Maybe that's even too much, maybe like 3. Yep, that probably will work. Hit OK. Command or Control D to deselect. And now we have a little shadow there for the owl. Maybe it's a little bit too strong, in fact. So if it is, we can just do something easy, like grab the eraser tool here. I use it so infrequently. There it is, eraser tool. Set the opacity of the eraser to like 40, 50%. Make the eraser a little bit bigger, and just draw one pass over the shadow. It's just going to weaken it up just like that. That's all right. And then we'll bring our poison dart frog and place him somewhere over here, maybe over here where he's noticeable. Come over here, grab the little frog. Let's drag him into the document. Voila, he is massive, as you can see. Command or Control T. We're going to scale him way down. Make him nice and tiny. And you can probably see he has a little fringing there, but because he's being placed over a lightly colored background, the fringing doesn't really matter in this case, so we don't need to be concerned with it. Command or Control T, let's just rotate him a little bit here, place him on the side of the O, or the top part of the O, whatever. Something kind of like that. Use the arrow keys to touch it up. Go back to the shadows layer, grab the brush, and maybe we can learn from our past mistake and just set the opacity of the brush to like 40% here. Paint with black, give him a little shadow. All right, and we can blur that shadow as well. Just grab our rectangular marquee tool filter. Let's do the same Gaussian blur. There you go. Command or Control D to deselect. A little shadow there for our frog. So we got our frog in place. We got the owl in place. The owl might be a little bit too light. So let's just clip a levels adjustment to the owl. So there, I select the owl, add a levels adjustment, Command Option or Control Alt and the letter G. And let's just simply bring the white point down on the owl. Yeah, I think something like that's going to work pretty well. So we're just going to darken him up a little bit, something like that. Reduce the contrast of the owl. There's before, there's after. I think he just blends a little bit better if we darken him up a touch. And because the trees look so cool, let's actually go and grab one of those trees again. Let's grab maybe the top left tree here, this guy. Drag him over. Because you could really see when we added this and it was beneath our cut letters, like that just looks so cool. I mean, it stinks that we're covering up our animals, but maybe if we just add some tree down, kind of just to the bottom middle, just to add a pop of green down there, that might be a cool, just sort of design element that'll just kind of hang out there for this banner graphic, whatever we're creating here. But last but not least, we need to begin colorizing this. So let's go ahead and drop a color balance layer above this, and we'll begin here with the shadows. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag about plus 15 reds into the shadows. I'm going to push some magenta into the shadows as well. So -5 there, pressing that back toward magenta. And then we want to really pump the blues into the shadows. So we'll go like plus 20 for blue shadows. And midtones here, we're going to again pump the reds, go like plus 15 on the reds. I think we'll again... No, actually, let's push about 10. Let's push some green into the midtones because we want an overall greenish, yellowish tint, which means I'll push some yellow into the midtones here. Like -20 looks probably good. And we'll come down here to the highlights. And for the highlights, I think I'm just going to push some red into the highlights and then maybe also some yellow into the highlights, something like that. So we can see before color balance, after color balance. It just really helps pull everything together. But we're going to take it even a step further with a selective color adjustment layer, right? Now here, we're going to go, let's go right to the blacks first. And here with the blacks, I don't want to mess with the cyan. I'm going to push a little bit of magenta into the blackest of pixels. I am also going to remove some yellow, therefore introducing blue into the darkest of pixels. And I'm going to add a little bit of like an Instagram fade. So I'm going to set black to -10%. You can see that really cool effect that we just got, right? There's before, there's after. It takes those really dark, shadowy areas and makes them like this milky, bluish, greenish color that just meshes so well with our color palette. I love it. Let's go up to the neutrals here and just tweak these as well. We're going to drop some red into this. So let's go like -15 on the cyan. Let's go about -5 on the magenta, therefore pushing more green into it, and probably +10 on the yellow, maybe like +5 on the yellow, something like that. And then for the blacks, I don't know, we'll make the midtones just a little bit brighter, but also kill off a little bit of contrast. We'll come to the whites here, and I'm going to push some blacks into the whites, which is just going to darken the white point a little bit. So that's going to serve to flatten some of those highlights just a little bit. I think it'll look kind of cool. Let's push some green into the highlights. Go like -10 on the magenta. Green is the opposite of magenta. That's why I'm thinking in these terms. And then here with yellow, we're going to straight up push yellow into the highlights. So go like +15 on the yellow. And I think we'll just leave cyan at 0. That looks pretty good. So there's before selective color. There's after selective color. And in fact, there's before any color treatment. There's after the color treatment. And if you wanted to add a grain layer at this point, just overall global grain, use camera raw, and a 50% gray layer set to like soft light, you could do that. But I don't think we're going to take the time to cover that here in this tutorial because boy, oh man, have we covered a lot. Guys, before you go, if you do create this effect, I really would like to see it because we just invested a lot of time in this. upload it to Instagram and tag me in your Instagram post. Like if you can tag me on the image or in the description. If you tag me in the actual image, I don't really miss any of them because they can sit there in my tagged images and I have time to go through them. Whereas sometimes if you just tag me in the description, it gets sort of lost in the notifications a little bit. So if you tag me in the image, I'll be able to see it. I'll like it. I'll comment on it. I would love to see what you guys can create with this. You can take this technique and apply it to all sorts of things, not just a zoo. You can do it with a space station or a game shop or any number of places or events or anything you would want to do. There's so much you can do with this peeled back text effect in Photoshop. So for this peeled back text effect in Photoshop, and tagging me on Instagram, by the way, I had a little Instagram bug pop up. @tutvid is my username. It came out a little awkwardly. But for creating this peeled back text effect in Photoshop and looking at masks and letters and isolated animals and stock photos, one of which apparently I hadn't purchased or I'm still using the comp version of it here for this tutorial, that's my mistake. But for this one, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. NathanielDoddsonTutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more great tutorials every day. Also, buy my course. It helps us do what we do, and this channel is supported by viewers just like you. You can also just click the thumbnail and watch another video from this channel. See you next time, guys.